Alright, let's try to make this video fun. What? RTS? That's not a color. That's ready to shoot. So basically we had a little paint left over from shooting today. Put it in a jar. I can dump it right in the gun and shoot with it. There's the color code we used. BASF or RM. Catalog color. And red metallic is all it says. MR 201.50. Then there's a 200, and there's a bunch of different numbers, lighter, darker, whatever, but this is the one the customer wanted to go with. Limco Supreme, not an overly expensive paint, not necessarily a cheap paint though. It's kind of middle of the road. Depends where you are and what's out there and everything else too. For me, this is fairly cost effective, and with dark colors and small metallic, this stuff is beautiful. So I'll show you that in a minute. Clear coat. That's it. This is probably a lower end to mid range, maybe. Again, depends where you are and whatever. It's a very high solid. I'd recommend cranking up the gun is one thing, but you get air, so you got to watch that too. So you kind of want a better gun for this than what I'm using, and I don't want to lead you astray, which is why I'm talking about that right away. The gun I'm using, these were like $250 a couple years ago. It's probably like $300, $320 now. ProTech 4500 HVLP. It's really well made. Look, it's got your 8 air ports in it. That goes in first, seems to work just fine. You can see how the holes are different sizes to do whatever the hell they got to do. Now it does seem to have that little plastic gasket there, but whatever, hasn't been an issue for me. I'm sure you can buy that rebuild kit for, who knows, probably cheap. Maybe not. So, base coat, we're talking about the red 63 Cadillac. I'll show you that in a minute. I run that up to about 25 and it lays down nice. 24, 25, totally fine. Almost wide open. Now this thing, one thing I will give this gun, the fan is insane. You almost got to bring it in, especially with the clear. You got to bring it in quite a bit. I run full fluid, which I used to not do, but if you don't do it because you're a little slower going to pay attention, once you get a bit of experience, go full fluid. Full air down here, full fluid on your needle. Make sure you got all the air, and then control just with this alone. It's weird at first, but eventually you'll get better at that, and it'll actually flow out and be nicer. Metallics lay down nicer. It's just better. So we touched on all that. Yeah, we'll talk primer, but I'm not going to show you all that because that's boring shit. We just spent 3 minutes on, blah, blah, blah. So whatever. This is the car. Using exactly what I showed you. And it's very clear. Now, one thing I'll say right off the hop, the paint is much darker than what you see on camera. It's more like dark blood with metallic in it. But it's actually filming pretty nice and very clear. There's plenty of reflection in it. Sometimes the metallics reflect a little less, but we'll look down the car, right? You can see that pile of trash, the ladder in the corner, and look, the table outside the booth that I was talking to you from earlier. You can literally see the cans on the floor. So pretty clear, pretty clean with the products I used, which aren't crazy expensive products or the highest end products by no means. Clear is nice. See, there's a little bit of orange peel. I'd say brand spanking new GM truck. Tahoe. So real decent. Can you cut and buff this? Absolutely. Are we gonna? I'll probably just kind of polish it out. And if I got to touch a spot here or there, maybe we'll do that. I'm not an amazing painter. I'm a mediocre painter. And I know that, and that's fine. But Everybody talks, especially if you're a newbie. You'll notice that a lot of guys talk about the body work, the body work, the body work, and the better the body work, the paint will be better. We're going to hit on that because that is true. And I've said it in other videos. If your body work is more or less on point and things are fairly clean and things flow really good and your gaps are decent, and not amazing, just the better the car is in primer and sanded, the better it's going to look. Even if you got orange peel, even if the paint is, you're going to have a nice car. So body lines, learn how to refine them, stuff like that. This car is not perfect. It's a 20-foot long car, which is insane for a two-door. Literally a 9-foot quarter, a 4-foot door, and a 5-foot fender to this edge here. So it's a big car, but you can block this out. It's a very flat car, and just look at the trash in the background there. Like, this car is pretty smooth for what it is. So let me tell you what we did. The front fenders didn't seem to be too bad. We sanded them, cleaned them up, shot them with a urethane from Pure Reflections, DTS 404 or 401. So it's direct to substrate. You can go over bare metal, no more than 1 inch square. We didn't go over any bare metal. We basically blocked her all out, did all our body work, a little bit of primer here and there, gave it a final block, we threw it on, and that's all we did to these front fenders and the top of the roof skin. Before we did that, we epoxy primed all the way around the front and back windshield, and we also epoxy primed up the jams, up under here, because that's where these cars are prone to go bad. So after we cleaned it all up, we wanted that locked in with epoxy. Jams as well, I believe. Now the epoxy primer was a high build. We used the CRE 321. And we put it on 2-3 coats, real fat. And we didn't bother doing the whole roof with that. We let that sit, and after a few hours you can paint over it with urethane. We took our urethane DTS, shot the roof. Now, one thing we shot that wasn't a jam, this section of the roof, we completely did it in the CRE 321 because this had a great big chunk of metal that was rotten on each side. We had to weld in plates. Well, we made patch panels, and they are flat and beautiful. You'd never know there was any work done, which means you did a good job. As far as shrinking and all that goes, I did a pretty good job. I'm not worried about it in the least. It is flat. And with this car, that's got to be flat. From that line to this line, you know, you have a little bit around, but not a lot. This way, it's got to be really flat. There's certain aspects of this oddball shaped car that have to be on point. So, doors. We took them off the car, cleaned up the jams. We did a bunch of work. This one had a big dent, and then up here was messed up, and then here we had to actually weld steel into it, fix the door. There was 1 inch of Bondo in this dent. It was like, it looked like a big old fist dent, like the Hulk hit it. Put 1 inch of Bondo in and they buried it, but there was some weirdness there when I went to block out the door. So we went ahead and stripped the door down. We refilled it, but first we took the dent out quite a bit, so there's not a lot of fill. Then we took the doors, we buried them in 3 real fat coats. I'm talking super fat coats, the complete door with the CRE 321 again. And we basically blocked it with 320, actually 220, 320, 400. Now 400 is what I blocked most of the car with at the end, and the reason why, the TDS sheet for the paint I'm using says 400 to 500 grit. So when people say, well, I went online and a guy told me to use 600 or 800, it doesn't matter what people say. Look at the TDS for the product you're using. You can go a little more. They usually have a parameter. This stuff says 400 to 500 recommended. Once you start sanding with 400, it becomes 500 real quick. So this whole car was probably prepped somewhere near the 4 to 500, well, wore out. So the whole car is about a 500 grit at this point. What I can tell you, there's no sand scratches, there's no lines, there's no marks. None of that crap showed through anywhere. And I'll give a shout out to a guy in a minute here because I tried something different on this paint job that I'd never done before. We'll talk about that in a minute. So let's go back to where we were, the body and prep, things being flat. So I told you how we did that, the DTS. We did that with the DTS. All that was the Cree, around the windows, around the jams, Cree. Back fenders. We shot from this body line to this body line. G2 feather filler. 2 fat coats on one side. Well, I think what I did is I did all the little spots and then buried it in 2 fat coats. This side I did 3 extremely heavy coats because this car had a lot of trauma. This whole back fender was buried in this. It was all waved, the back corner had been smashed, and I think what happened, at some point back in the 70s, somebody put this in a ditch. They totally wiped out this whole side of the car. We found that underneath the old paint jobs and all the Bondo and junk. So we straightened it out, but because there was so much work, we wanted to make sure we'd hedge our bet. And I wanted to try the G2 feather fill. I bought a gallon, ended up not using it. Thought on this job, let's do the quarters. There was a lot of it on the quarters. And again, we blocked it. And I think on this, yeah, we would have done a 220 and then 320 and then 400. And I went across it 2-3 times with the 400, basically till metal started, you know, like you want to see ghosting almost through it, right? And sealed up any little spots and fixed it. And I'll tell you what, the body lines on this car, we did refine them really, really well. And I did it by eye. Usually you can run a tape. But I've been pretty good where I can come up, block past, and then I'll take that round Durablock, the cylinder, and I can bring it up and down, back and forth, and just keep chasing it. And my lines seem to come out really nice. You can try that, but if you're a little worried, do one way, run a bead of tape, block it to the tape. There's tricks, try them, use them. Whatever works for you is the right way. I got to tell you, this car is pretty stellar. There's a couple little spots here and there. I do got to come back and do some fixing. I'm not going to do one of those videos where, yeah, look at amazing, shiny, you know, and then they just walk away and you never really know. No, it's a pretty good paint job. We're happy with it. You know, we got all the little edges and everything. We're happy. Not too many blurs or anything that we can see. A couple little pieces of paint came off of the plastic that we had over the roof, over the engine bay, and in the windows. I might have to buff them out of the fender and the door. However, I think it might be easy. The only blur is at the very bottom of the door. I think I'm going to wet sand those 2 panels and flow coat them, and it should look like the rest of the car. Now I say flow coat because if you know what a flow coat is, guys will just put a bunch of clear on a car. It don't matter really how it turns out or if it's bumpy. They'll spend time wet sanding the whole car. And the clear going over the clear, especially if it's soft, it will adhere really well. So what you do is you kind of run slow and you put one heavy coat on the whole entire car and you concentrate, you get it as good as you can, you walk away, and it looks like glass. Now the primer I showed you that I use, it's an oddball primer. The solids don't want to atomize very well. You almost got to go fat. So on the first coat, go medium wet to wet. You get the odd little dry spot. That's okay. You just want to get a lot of material on the car for glue. You do another coat, and then you do a third coat. But on that last coat, you can pretty much flow coat it, and it won't run. Well, if you put enough on, and you can put it on thick, but you don't want to have to go back and, oh, I missed a little. No, like you got to make sure you get it in one go, and it won't run if you can pull it off. It took me practice to get there, but once I figured that out, I find things look very juicy, which is kind of what you want. And when you get that juicy look, you don't really want to cut and buff because you kind of lose and try to bring it back. I guess it comes back, but I don't know. It's not quite the same. Like, the look is different. So maybe that's just me. It's just what I think. So again, you're seeing a very orangey red, but the car looks almost burgundy. It's so bloody. So keep that in mind. But yeah, by blocking the car out, this is the straightest car I have ever done, and I know that, and I can't believe it. I was worried about it because it was such a mess. I probably got a week worth of extra time blocking and messing around with this thing to get it to look good. But I can tell you right now, I'm glad I did, because the car looks truly better than it actually is. Now let me show you what I used to block. The controversial Durablocks. Oh no, don't say it ain't so. They're all wavy and move, you know what I mean? There's no way that like black foam can be any good for anything. Look, you're going like this, you're going like this, even if it's not 100%. They're not meant for paint work. They're meant for body work and filler, and honestly, they're freaking amazing. They do a good job at that. You want to get your fine blocking in the primer. Now, you can buy all the acrylic blocks in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that. One of these with a sharp 400, and I use this actually for my 320 and the 400. And that whole car is as flat can be. You can buy this without spending a fortune, which is why I show it. Now, some people will argue, oh, but it's got a little bit of flex to it, and guys are saying harder's better. I agree with that. I'm very light to the touch when I use stuff. If I want it to flex, I'll push a touch. But I mean, I don't hold it like this. I tend to hold it like this on both edges. And if I need it to be a little flatter, I'll grab it right in the middle, use the flat spot, and then I'll grab both and, you know, kind of bring it back in, because there's going to be a bit of a curve anyway. And there's not, this is one of the flatter cars out there. Now, with the exception of the Dodge Dart. Dart, very flat. Well, maybe not that one, but in general. So you don't have to spend money on an insane block. However, if I had enough of a budget to allow for a little more time, I would be tempted to wet sand this, throw another 2-3 coats of clear on it, buy a couple of big kid blocks, and go to town with the super light paper and wet, and oh boy, would I ever love to use an acrylic block for something like that. But we don't got the budget nor the time, and I got to get paid and get this the hell out of here at some point, so that's the way it goes. Now, I want to give a shout out to a guy out there who's got a channel, and I pulled off a trick that I don't think I could have done without his advice. I was watching Trigger Man. If you're out there, Trigger Man, this one's for you, because you really saved my ass on this car. And basically, I was watching a video, and what he's doing, his videos are great because he paints real fast. He's running around the car. He narrates through the whole thing. He says a lot of things with a lot of tricks. It's hard to keep up sometimes because there's a lot of info in a small space of time. What he was explaining was with the base coats. He says, you know, make sure you do a wet coat and another wet coat, and it'll be good. And I thought to myself, well, we all kind of do that. But then he keeps talking and he goes, well, people kind of put it on. I'm watching your videos. It ain't going on too thick, and you're wondering why your metallics don't look good. So I remember thinking about that. And I tend to shoot paint, I believe, a little bit on the thick side. And when I painted the roof last week, I kind of went up and I put it a little heavy, and I thought, it looks really good. I'm going to do that. I painted the roof that way. But after watching his video, when I went to do the car, I barely started around the front headlight area. And I thought about what he said about the metallics having a little more of a bed to lie down in, and you'll get a much nicer finish. So less tiger striping, this, that, and whatever. Now, a dark color like this, generally speaking, you can hide a little more in it. But I'll tell you what happened. I come around that side of the car, back the fin, across here, back of this fin, start coming down. When I was leaning over this, my mask must have dropped a bead of water. I came across and I hit it. Then I saw it. and I had to touch it with a towel just to pull the moisture off it. Tried to blow it off. It wasn't quite right. I kind of buried it a little bit, kept going. When I got back to here, I kind of looked back, and it was making me nuts. And this was on the final last coat, and I was doing what Trigger Man said. I was laying the last coat down almost like you wanted to put a fat coat of single stage on the car. Now, when I did that, I noticed how the metallic was lying out. And as I was going and looking back on the whole car, I realized the difference. You could see the difference. It was nice. But it was so wet, I took the chance of coming over, a couple little swoops, and blended it out. Now, of course, you could kind of see that I had done that. And I thought, well, might have to come back and do something with this quarter or recoat the whole car, which, God, that sucks, especially when you got enough mils build on it, right? So I came up to the door before it dried. This all happens within seconds because you can't fart around. And I shot the door, went up and down so far. Then I hit the fender and finished it out. Went around the light area. Let me show you what that looks like. So you got to come in here. You got to hit this edge and get all in here. By the time I did that and walked back, the spot that I had repaired, it sucked right in. You could still kind of see it, but it was almost gone. And I got real close. I went and got one of my bright lights, one of these wand lights, and I kept going across, and I'm going to have to get one of them sunlights because that would have probably helped. So even though I could kind of see it, like it wasn't really there, but I ran the light across it. But whatever. Now, because it was so fat, and Trigger Man mentioned, you got to do this, and as you go, sometimes just make sure you let it dry, let it flash off. Well, I did that. Actually, when the house had lunch, this stuff says you can clear coat over it within so many hours, and it's pretty much like put it on at night, clear coat it in the morning. Now, I never let anything go that long, but I was watching it in the 20-minute flash time. There was a lot of dark spots in it. So I went in, had lunch, farted around. 40 minutes later came out. It had flashed off almost. I think I let it sit about another 20 minutes. There was a couple spots inside the fenders, not important spots, but you can't clear over them until they flash off anyway, so you don't want them to fail or delaminate. So I let it flash off, but when I walked over to this side of the car, I could no longer see my repair. It was fat enough, it sucked it right in, and it was gone. So, Trigger Man, thanks, buddy. You saved my ass on this quarter. And not only that, this is probably the nicest painted panel on this whole car, and I'm stoked. I'm just stoked. Yeah, if you see the reflection, crazy pants. It's 10 o'clock at night. Came out to do a video because the ones I did in the last couple days sucked. So didn't upload those. We'll upload this one. Very happy with how this is turning out. It's going to be a gorgeous, gorgeous car once all the chrome's on it. Anyway, I think that's it for now. Thanks for watching.